hier, ne?
Ja, mache ich auch nochmal, genau, dann haben wir das. So, lieber die Aufnahme schon mal anschmeißen, ich glaube auf den... Moment. Kriegt da kein Signal rein? Sollte eigentlich eins kriegen.
Gerade schon.
Würde mich wundern, wenn er kein Signal liefert, wenn ich aufnehme. Ist aber nicht schlimm im Zweifelsfall. Wenn nicht, ich habe eine eigene Tonspur drauf. Stress dich nicht. Macht ja keinen Stress, Robin. Ja. Also ich nehme auf meinem Camcorder auf. Also wenn du auf alle Fälle ruhig aufnimmst, weil dann hast du die Tonspur drauf. Im Zweifelsfall habe ich ja schon mal eure Tonspur vom Pult. Sind die elektronisch?
Aber jetzt mal in Ihrem Berufsalltag, was machen Sie jetzt genau? Also klar,
Ich bin Personal IT-Coach für Führungskräfte.
Ja?
Das heißt, ich helfe Führungskräften, Technologien zu nutzen. Also weil oft ist es so, dass Führungskräfte einfach noch nicht mal die Fragen verstehen, die die ITler ihnen stellen. Und ich helfe ihnen eben, weil ich einen technischen Hintergrund habe und selber 10 Jahre lang Geschäftsführer im Mittelstand war. Das heißt, ich kenne die technische Welt als C64-User seit eben 43 Jahren. Und ich war selber Geschäftsführer im Mittelstand. Das heißt, ich kenne einfach beide Seiten und die bringe ich zusammen. Das ist so die Idee. Okay. Und das mache ich in Form von Vorträgen, so wie heute früh. Das mache ich in Form von Beratung, Training und Coaching. Ja, das ist das, was ich tue.
Interessant.
Ja. Also, weil ich sehe viel zu viel Disconnect zwischen Management und zwischen Technik.
Yeah,
also
klar,
da ist einfach unrealistische Erwartungen. So, da ist der Fokus auf den Shiny Tools statt auf der Bereinigung der Daten beispielsweise. Ja. Da ist eben der Fokus auf dem Thema Tools und schlechten Prozessen. Und da sage ich immer, wichtiger ist, die Prozesse sauber zu kriegen. Das ist einfach immer das Wichtigste überhaupt.
Wo sind Sie ansässig?
In Berlin. In München geboren, in der Welt zu Hause. Und ich lebe da, wo meine beiden Frauen wohnen. Also eine von meinen beiden Frauen ist mittlerweile ausgezogen. Zum Glück die jüngere. So, 11:30 Uhr haben wir. Dann stelle ich mir nämlich den Wecker noch mal auf. Ich muss gerade mal gucken. Wir legen los um 10:30 Uhr. Genau. Und ich stelle mir den Wecker auf...
IT-Fitness für Führungskräfte. Das ist ein guter.
Genau, das ist, was ich tue. 11:20 Uhr. Stelle ich den Wecker. Wunderbar. Genau. Use it or lose it. And I will do it in English. So, sollte ich in Deutsch starten, dann mich gerne darauf hinweisen, dass ich es dann doch bitte in Englisch machen sollte.
Ja, alles gut. Ich glaube, die sprechen alle Englisch. Weil das sieht man, dass mein Deutsches auch aus.
Also was wir aber gerne fragen können, sollten alle nur Deutsch sprechen, dann können wir es auch in Deutsch machen, das ist auch kein Thema. Also ich finde es dann auch affig, wenn wir nur Deutschsprachige im Raum haben, das dann auf Englisch zu machen. Also das können Sie ja noch mal kurz abfragen. Is anybody who's not speaking German in the room? Also... Weil wenn alle Deutsch sind, dann finde ich es manchmal affig, wenn ein Deutscher vor Deutschen Englisch redet und wir es unnötig schwer machen, die Informationsvermittlung. Und ich kann jederzeit hinterher das Video dann mit KI auf Englisch übersetzen. Das ist auch kein Thema. Also das kriegen wir mittlerweile mit KI lippensynchron in alle Sprachen übersetzt. Ja, ist kein Thema. Also, HeyGen, das ist extrem gut. Also da lädt man ein Video hoch und lädt es in der Wunschsprache wieder runter. Also das heißt, wenn die Sorge ist, wir hätten aber die Aufzeichnung gerne in Englisch, das kriegt man per KI. Das ist überhaupt kein Thema. That's not a problem. Ja, kommen Sie rein, wir haben noch Platz. Join the room. Ich hoffe, das war so in Ihrem Sinne, lieber Herr Kniest.
Ja, alles im Sinne. Ich habe mir nur Sorgen gemacht. Sie haben gestern gesagt, dass Sie unten sind. Ich wusste nicht. Aber das
genau, ich habe das zum Glück noch vorher gecheckt, ja, dass ich im richtigen Raum bin. Ja. Da haben mich die technischen Kollegen noch mal darauf hingewiesen.
Supi. Vom Licht her okay?
Ja, das passt alles. Ich weiß nicht, ob man eine Chance hat, diese Lücke noch zu schließen. Ich weiß nicht, weil das schaut so aus, als würde das nicht manuell gehen, sondern nee, andersrum, dass wir es zumachen. Das ist aber, bin ich ja froh, dass Ihnen das auch so geht. Wegen der Kamera, das halt manchmal mit den Gegenlichtern so ein bisschen. Aber ist alles First World Problem, alles nicht schlimm. Aber machen Sie keinen Stress, das ist alles, die Kamera kriegt es zur Not auch hin. Vorsicht, Vorsicht.
Ich finde schon irgendeinen Haken.
Ja, wunderbar, ich sehe schon, Sie sind klasse unterwegs.
Irgendwo.
Da packt der Chef noch selber an, oder wie war das?
Der Problem sucht Lösung.
Ja. Ich sehe schon, Sie sind super pragmatisch. Gucken Sie das.
Ist das besser so?
Dass Sie sich nicht verletzen. So. Ziehen wir den wieder zu. Super, die Lücke ist kleiner geworden.
Also zumindest mal.
Sehr schön, klasse.
Das ist besser als
Sie
vorher.
sind klasse, Herr Kniest. Wunderbar.
Sieht so, ach, wie schön auch noch.
Ja, toll, oder? Das ist doch wieder ein richtiger Effekt. Ja. Ja, ihr seid halt die Geilsten.
Sie haben eine private Kamera noch, ne?
Ja, ja, genau.
Das sieht nicht so schön aus.
Genau, ich gucke da mal rein. Hallo. Wunderbar.
Du nimmst auch hier mit auf.
Ich nehme dem auch auf, ja.
Wir kommen nämlich hier gerade nicht in die Einstellung.
Ja, macht euch keinen Stress, also ist gar kein Thema.
Mal Licht anmachen, es ist so dunkel hier.
Nö, passt.
Also wir können normales Licht, also wenigstens diese Innen.
Ach so, ja, können wir vielleicht
Weil das
nochmal.
ist echt
Ja, ja, nicht, dass die Leute müde werden, sondern eine Idee. Ist ja eigentlich recht. Macht euch keinen Stress. Vielleicht ist auch meine Kamera, die sagt, wenn ich aufnehme, gebe ich kein Signal raus. Es würde mich wundern, aber es könnte sein.
Das kann halt sein, ja.
Es kann sein, dass der sagt, wenn ich aufnehme, gebe ich kein Signal aus.
Ja.
Das habe ich ehrlich gesagt blöderweise nicht getestet, weil ich habe es im Streaming teilweise gehabt, dann habe ich aber nicht aufgenommen auf der Kamera selber.
Wir haben es ja gerade schon ausprobiert, es lief ja schon.
Ja, ich vermute mal, es ist meine Kamera. Stresst euch aber nicht rein, ich bin schon froh, wenn ich eine gute Tonspur habe, weil die kriege ich ja darüber. Ne?
Ich genau durchs Pult.
Ja.
Ich nehme mal was Pult auf.
Ja. Ja. Ja, ruhig auf die Aufnahme schon mal drücken, kein Stress. Macht euch keinen Stress. Genau, wunderbar. Ach, ich sehe schon hier.
So, good morning, everyone. So this is an English-speaking session. I was wondering, do we have any international guests who cannot speak German because your speaker is also German-speaking? So we say it's great. It's no problem. So welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to present you to Thorsten, Jekel, MBA, and he's an IT coach for managers. I'm quite sure you listened to his keynote speak this morning, and this session is now about Q&As and application fields for the topic he raised this morning. So very happy to listen to your presentation.
Thank you very much for your warm words, and we probably can get a bit less audio on that, otherwise it will be probably, because I'm usually giving a bit more power than the other speakers. So to wake you up, but I hope, can we get a bit less audio? I think it's a bit too loud. Thank you very much. I think that's a bit better for you because I'm usually a bit louder than the other ones who have the micro on the belly, so which is sometimes a challenge. And even a bit less probably because I'm usually giving a bit more power. Yeah, wonderful. Well, come here after my keynote. Very lucky to see my colleagues from the table from yesterday night. So you survived yesterday, so that's great. Wonderful. I assume that most of you have seen my keynote, and of course what I can do is I can add another hour of presentation and slides, but the basic idea was actually to say, okay, which questions do you have? And of course, on one hand, we had that digital format where we had these audience Q&As where we said, but when it doesn't work, and I see, okay, it says, oh, it says something. It says research. Great, so to say, in terms of Q&A. So what do we have here more in terms of questions? We see summary of long presentations. So these are the first questions we have in here. Great. So I see we already have some questions. In addition, what we can do is we can take questions from the floor here. And what I will do is I will repeat your question when you hand them in, because we're also going to record it. So afterwards you will have a chance to revisit it. So before I have a look on the questions that are already here, and when you ask the question, why is this guy watching to his smartphone? So this guy is watching to his smartphone because I can see the questions on my smartphone too. do when they are longer here. But before I start with the online questions, who has the first question either related to this or to a different topic which I can either answer immediately, or if I don't have an answer yet, I promise you get it afterwards, because I'm also not Mr. 100% perfect. I hope I can give you a lot of answers, and I see you seem to have the first question. Is that correct?
I have one on my mind.
Yeah, super. What is your first question? Let me know.
It's a lot depends on a good prompt.
Absolutely.
And writing a good one is quite time consuming.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about how to optimize writing of speed up the testing of prompts. And I mean, I saw myself a few days ago with 5 different tabs of Copilot open on the in the web version. Because if you do it in Teams, for example, you only have one interface, and you run it next to each other, but it's all pretty much manual. And I was wondering if there's some way to, some tweak to run more tests quickly, but without being a programmer.
Great. So the question for all of those who are just coming into the room and for the recording is to say, do you have some hints, some practical tips on how to prompt with the systems? And this is a very good question, because prompting is like when you talk to a team member to say, and it makes a difference when you say, please write me a report. And a smart member of your team would ask, okay, on what shall I write that report? To say, do you have any samples, for example? So what's the target audience? So a smart member of your team would ask those questions. Artificial intelligence doesn't ask you those questions by default. So you have to train it a bit. And therefore, what we'll do, I will switch from presentation mode into the Microsoft Copilot mode. And you already mentioned Microsoft Copilot. And for those of you who are not working with Microsoft 365 or with the Copilot, good news. These principles, which I'm showing you here, you can also apply them to other artificial intelligence systems. It also works with ChatGPT, the basic principles here. Why do I show it with Microsoft 365 and the Copilot? Because, give me an idea, who of you have Microsoft 365 in your corporation? So I see literally every hand is going up. So what you already have is, and what I can do now is I can switch between my Copilot, which I have here. This is the paid version with an extra license where you can see it. I have a work and a web tab. But what I can also do is I can switch to the profile of my wife. And my wife has the license of Microsoft 365, which is not paid. So, which is the version which you have integrated into your system. So, because with many workshops, people say, everything you're showing here is just working with a paid version of Microsoft Copilot in the system. We don't have that. I probably cannot even decide it in my organization because I'm not the owner of the organization. I'm a team member. My IT has said, okay, it doesn't work with that. So when you have it, yes, the IT is able to block even those functionalities, but usually you should be able to access it. And the first thing I recommend is you have those agents within Copilot. This is what you have in ChatGPT. They are called GPTs. So who of you has ever worked with any GPT? Yeah, these are the special bots. There's a question or a remark?
Do you have an English mod?
Oh, thank you very much for that. This is my wife is still in German. Then I switch over to the English version because this is now. Thank you very much. How can I help? Thank you very much for that. So I switched mine to English, and my wife seems to be working today. So therefore she switched hers back to German. She was wondering to say, what is TJ doing today? Switching to English. I want to work in German. So, but what I show you here, even the paid version, also works in the free version. The first thing I always recommend is looking into the agents. And when you don't see all those agents here, you should have something which is called here all agents, or you should have explore agents in your system. This is the starting page, the m365.cloud.microsoft. This is the starting page. And here I recommend to go to the agents, and when you go to the agents, what you see here is agents from Microsoft. So, and agents from Microsoft, let's see whether our wireless LAN doesn't break down here, otherwise I'll get a backup with my own internet here. There you find a prompt coach. Who has worked with a prompt coach already? So the prompt coach, oh, that's great, I see one hand. What's your experience with the prompt coach? Would you like to share your experience?
Yeah, I tried.
We even have a microphone from the boss. That's cool. Wow, I have the highest paid assistant in the room. That's cool.
I didn't thought I have to share the experience. So, what I tried to do for evaluation, I tried to build like an agent for the market research.
Yeah.
And that's how I used Copilot with the agent.
Super, very smart approach, and the prompt coach is a very good starting point because it helps you to build prompts. And even me, who is quite experienced in prompting, I regularly use the prompt coach. And when you are also talking to your team to say, are you able to use your system more productively, it's a good idea and a good starting point to train a bit with the prompt coach. And when you see that, and this is also integrated into the version which is delivered with the Microsoft 365 license. And when you open it, and everybody who has, by chance, their notebook computers is sitting in front of you, you can already go into that too. And what we have here is See More. And with See More, you get some more recommendations in terms of how you can use the prompt coach. And here you also have the prompt gallery. And here you see, okay, some recommendations in terms of which prompts you can use to use the prompt coach. There is also a similar tool for ChatGPT. Andreas and I, we were chatting about that just some 2 or 3 weeks ago, about the quality of that. Very good quality, but whenever possible, and as most of the hands raised when I ask, are you working with Microsoft 365? You should always prefer to work with Microsoft 365. Why? Number one is in Microsoft 365, and you see that, and I will, of course, answer your question, of course, in terms of how do we prompt. When you see here, you have enterprise data protection. Usually, you're dealing with pieces of confidential information. So when you are uploading things into ChatGPT, which a lot of employees and organizations are doing. So looking into adoption rate of AI in companies, we usually have an adoption rate which is approximately about 20%. But we have 90% usage of employees using AI in the company. So shadow IT was always a big thing in organizations. Shadow AI is not making it better. So when you have logged into the Edge browser with your Microsoft 365 credentials, what you should definitely do, then every piece of information which you upload is only uploaded to data centers in Frankfurt. So you're in Germany because all your data in Microsoft 365 is securely stored on German servers. Yes, the processing of artificial intelligence is done in Ireland at the moment because Microsoft doesn't have the processing plants in Germany yet, but they're building it, and Ireland is in the EU. So you're within the EU boundaries. And what they don't do is they use the same models like ChatGPT. They're using the GPT-5 model, so you get the same grade models, but they have installed them on their own data centers. So it's not that they redirect these inquiries into OpenAI. And OpenAI, I don't know whether you have followed that. OpenAI currently has a lawsuit with the New York Times because they weren't very amused when they found out that it was possible to access articles in full text which were behind the paywall. So due to that, even when you untick the box in ChatGPT that it shall not store your data, every chat is stored. So, and this is where people say, okay, we cannot use because of exactly this. And I said, please don't stop where the general media stops. Yes, it's a good idea to not use ChatGPT for any client data, but it's a very good idea to use the technology, to use the IT, to use it with Copilot, and there you are safe. Of course, the question is always, do I trust Microsoft? But if you wouldn't trust Microsoft, you should not even use Outlook. And I assume most of you are using Outlook. So therefore, of course, always, and I don't have to tell you about risk and risk taking and risk decision. That's much more of your business than mine. Coming back to the prompt coach, here what you have, you can even say, help me generate a prompt to be used in Copilot, or you can even ask to say, how is the perfect prompt? So, and you see the bottleneck is always sitting in front of the computer, so, but it would even ignore my typo which I have here. And what you will get is you will get a first result which says goal, a context, a source of expectations. And this is a very typical example of AI. It's a kind of an okay answer. It's okay. So, but what I usually say is, what do you need? And I say, okay, extend the framework to this. And probably, as I have an idea on how to compile, how to compose a good prompt, you should ideally have a very good idea on how to brief an artificial intelligence to do some of your work. So, and what I really like, this system is not called autopilot. It is called Copilot. So don't use it as an autopilot, use it as a copilot. So don't ever take the first idea. So, and one thing is that, and I hear that very often, I see that very often. I hear that prompts are getting longer and longer. And yesterday we heard, okay, when the prompt is longer than the result, then probably there's something wrong. The idea is not to make one monster prompt. The idea is like eating an elephant. So how do you eat an elephant? Bite by bite. So what you do is you work iteratively. So you start with something and you don't even have to invest too many thoughts in what it is, but you should work iteratively. And here I also said, okay, let's have a first idea. And when you work with prompts and with IT, it's basically two types of people. So like when you're writing a report, so I didn't do my PhD, but my wife did it, but I did my MBA thesis in the UK. And one part of the students have an issue with white pieces of paper, to say I have to compile any report and I have no first idea. So then you can say give me a first idea. But you should never take the first idea as the final result. The second party, and this is kind of my wife, she always says I need to have a first draft and then I rework it. For me, it's much easier to say I'm giving a first draft and I give it to a human person or I give it to artificial intelligence to say give me additional ideas. So and you have to decide, so who of you thinks for me it's easier to write a text and have AI overworking it to optimize it? Who would be these ones? And the other ones who would say, okay, I need a first draft from AI and I revise it. So you see, it's both hands, so it's kind of personality, but what you should never do to say just write me something and it is. Now I say, okay, extend it and some ideas for me to say, okay, role is the most important thing. What is the idea? So, when you write a prompt, you should always say, okay, you can assign a role to the artificial intelligence. And that's one of the greatest things. When you have people that are currently in the States, for example, in your international network, and you cannot access them because they're still sleeping. So what you can do is, give me a name of one of your experts in the US. You would probably ask on some issues, Andreas. Roger Grabowski, for example. So you could say, okay, you are Roger Grabowski, the expert on which is his special area of expertise? He's a business valuation expert. Business valuation expert. We say you are one of the leading business valuation expert, Roger Grabowski. So does he have a web page, some presence? He's already retired. Has he written some books? Okay, when he has written some books. Sorry that I don't know them yet. I'm still learning. And the good thing is when you have industry experts, so what you can do, you are this, Mr. Grabowski, for example, you are this, and you can not only assign one role, you can assign a combination. Probably there are 2 or 3 experts which would be sitting on a panel at a conference like this. And you say, you are the combination of these experts. This is the most important thing that you say, who are you? And you can also even, he is even retired but still alive, as I understand. So probably you have some colleagues that are already on the other side. But when they have left some legacies, some books, for example, what you can do is you can say, you can this. And when you have probably somebody that is new in the area, you can say, please combine it with the Sesame Street explainer, for example, because Sesame Street was originally founded for educating children that didn't have access to formal education. That was the original idea of Sesame Street. So you can say, so you're the combination of the expert and of the one who is, in Germany I always say, the Sendung mit der Maus. So you're the combination of the super expert and of Sendung mit der Maus. This is a format in Germany where it explains the world to young children. So because sometimes when you want to, for example, summarize things, when you get something out, it is sometimes challenging to understand it. So combine different roles. This is the first one. Then what you say, to say, okay, what's the result, the goal? So actually this is, I added, and it does, it's not a big problem. Say, what do you want? To say it makes a difference whether you want to have a blog post, whether you want to have a detailed report. And coming back to the process in terms of working iteratively. I have some colleagues, I've written 9 books now, and I have some colleagues to say, okay, that is too hard for me to write these books, to say, can't artificial intelligence do that? So, and of course it can help, but what you would do is, you wouldn't say, write me a book on fake news on artificial intelligence. What you would do is to say, give me 10 ideas for a title of a book on that. And my ideas, this should be the main message. These should be some ideas I want to bring into that. You start with the title. Then you say, please give me a structure in terms of chapter structure. Then you say, give me something, an introduction. Give me 2 or 3 points for something like that. And this is, you always have a context window. Who has heard about context window? So context window is the kind of memory the system has. And therefore, Google Gemini currently has the largest context window which you have. So when you have the challenge that your AI always forgets things when it's not critical, Google Gemini is the one which has the largest window. But important is to say, what's the result? The next thing is to say, what is the target group? To say, for whom is it? Is it for evaluation experts, or is it for evaluation dummies like your speaker today? So to say, it makes a difference. So when you have something like the workshops, yes, the first workshop yesterday, I didn't get a word, would be too much, but at least I was able to take much less out of that workshop like you, because you already are in that area of expertise, you can talk on that. So the question is, who is the target group? And when you're writing, for example, something as a preparation for a conference, it is a difference than when you want to have some supporting material for a quotation for a client. Because I assume most of your clients are not evaluation pros, so you need to probably write something where you say, okay, here we have changing legislation. These are the main points which you have to take into consideration. And then you say, you're the super expert, and you're also the super Sesame Street expert who can explain it to managing directors. So, because they are usually not so much in the detail like you and me are in your subjects. So therefore to say, what's the target group? And sometimes also it's a good idea to go lower in terms of the target group. So like in marketing, for example, one thing that marketing people love to do is to say, write it for a 12-year-old boy. So when you write it for a 12-year-old boy, you get perfect marketing texts. So short sentences, very clear, and sometimes even when you want to write something for an offering, and I always say the difference between a 12-year-old boy and a CEO is sometimes smaller than we think. Yeah. So therefore, sometimes also say, what's your target audience? So then to say where, oh, and a typical thing, what I did is I accidentally hit the enter. So what you should always hit is not enter, but shift enter. So with shift enter, you can still edit. So role result, so it added it, and now I can even say, okay, add another ones, add, and now we had already the role, the result, the target groups, to say the publication source or place. Where shall it be publicized? So when you, for example, writing something for a journal, so then it's a good idea to say it is to be written for this in this journal. So because every journal has some kind of prerequisites or formats, more practical, more academic, for example. So this is the idea. And then you say, what is samples? Very often here, the system is not responding to my expectations. It's writing completely different than I do. That would be like asking a new team member to write a report and never provide him with a sample. So what would you do? You would say, here we have an audit report from another company which is hopefully a bit similar to what we're looking now. Please orientate yourself on that. Please take that as a sample. So therefore it's always important to give samples. So, and therefore, it is important to not do that with ChatGPT, so because you don't want to upload your data there, especially with real data. So, but then to say, okay, give him samples and then give the tone. So, do you want to be more formal? Do you want to be less formal? And this, and when I now add it, so you get some more idea. Brilliant. You are building a truly comprehensive framework by adding publication place, samples, and tone. You're ensuring that prompts are not only clear and complete, but also audience ready. So here, say some ideas: goal, context, to say what do you want to do, what is the relevant background information, what are expectations, how shall it be structured or formatted in that thing, to say which role should it, for example, take. And a very practical advice also, you should always say you are experienced evaluator with 20 years of business practice. Don't give it less than 20 years, don't give it more than 20 years. And it's not my personal opinions, but I'm reading a lot of studies on which prompts are working very well. And currently it says, okay, when you give 20 years, then this gives you a very good result, because you say, after 20 years, now I'm having 37 years of working experience, so I'm probably overdue with my knowledge, still keeping me fresh, hopefully. But in terms of the prompts, you should always say 20 years of business experience. Less gives you less bad results, and more also gives you bad results. So therefore, to say with 20 years of industry experience is currently the role. So which role should it, which result should it become? What is the target group? Where is it going to be publicized? To say, are there any examples or templates to follow? What's the style or the voice that should be used? Formal, friendly, or persuasive? So that's a good idea, and when you can also use it with the standard things, and you have some recommendations here. We're still in the prompt coach where you can say explain how to choose the right tone and sample. It's a very good idea, which you have here. So prompt coach is a very good idea as a starting point to train for you or for your team. And here, when you have some things, you get some examples in that. So you can use that as a training point to start with. In addition, what you can do is when you go into a regular chat, you can always use it as an additional assistant. You find it here under Tools, and under Tool you see here Explore More Agents, or you can just use this sign which you know from emails. So, and here you can address all your bots, and you can now also say, so you have a regular prompt, and you can say, before I prompt that, optimize that prompt with a prompt coach. So you can either do that in the same AI, or you can do it in a different AI. So use AI to optimize your prompts, and always ask them to do that. the next step is, when you're working with these systems, in the settings, what you can do is you can personalize your systems. Here as an example within ChatGPT, but you can also do that in other systems. What you can do here is you can give it custom instructions. These are here in German, no problem. So what we do is I just copy them, and I'm using a service which I can highly recommend. Don't know who's already working with DeepL? So DeepL, I see hands up, perfect. So you can even upload complete reports, you can download them. And by the way, it's a German company. So therefore, I'm not too, for those international guests, so don't get me wrong. So it's not that I'm proud that it's a German system. So it's just as the majority of the audience here, because being German is by incident, so that I was born here. That's not something which I earned. But as a lot of you are German companies, I always get the concern, okay, US artificial intelligence is always critical in terms of GDPR and other things. Yes, and therefore I always try to get usually the German or European ones. So what do I have here? So just to see the translation here, what I gave here, and this is my version of custom instructions. So what I said, okay, the answer should be rather formal, using the formal U style. In German it's the Z style, so not everything translates fully, but even in German it makes a difference. U and U is not the same even in English, so you have formal or less formal style. So because usually I say texts I'm writing are usually for a business audience, so as they should be less casual and more formal. Then I say, the answers should be given in bullet points, because my clients are used that I'm writing my emails, my answers, my reports, usually in short and concise bullet points. If I were writing prosa with artificial intelligence, my clients would say, this was not written by you, that was written by artificial intelligence. So I know my style in that, so therefore I put it in that. Then I said the copilot should be rather neutral. Very important thing. Because artificial intelligence is very positive, which is not a bad thing, of course. But when you say, okay, in the default mode, if you would probably say, I have a new business idea. I'm opening an evaluation company on Mars. So every human being would say, okay, probably too many beers yesterday night. AI says, you are creative. Super. So that's the standard mode. So why is that? Because the providers of these systems want that you use them more. So what do you usually like more? Those people in the team that say, great idea, boss, that's cool, yes, the yes-sayers. So, but the yes-sayers are not always those ones who are bringing the best results in a team. Usually, it's the harder way to have those people objecting to your views and say, boss, yes, you're the boss, but that's a stupid idea. I have a better one. So, and therefore, it's a good idea to give a briefing and sometimes even to say, you should be rather critical. And in Copilot, what you can only do, you can only add one custom instruction. But what you can do is, I have several of those instructions, and I have stored them into a OneNote notebook. For that, OneNote is a great idea. So, and then I can swap these custom instructions depending on what I am doing. Next thing, to say, if the prompt is unclear, ask for clarification. So when I left school, I was at the German Bundeswehr, at the military, and I learned that to say diese Richtung 100. So it was also the question to say, okay, did you understand the order? So that's what I learned in the military, and what I learned as a managing director in the industry, to say, okay, when you give a briefing, when you give an order to somebody, always a good idea to say, okay, what did you understand? Please repeat what I told to you, because the default in human communication is the misunderstanding. So I'm married since 31 years, I know what I'm talking about. And the same with AI. So the default is misunderstanding, and the systems cannot watch behind your forehead. No chance. So therefore to say, If a prompt is unclear, ask for clarification. And then if the Copilot is unsure, it should respond with, I am not sure. Who has ever made a vacation in Thailand? So when you ask in Thailand for the way, you always get a result, even if the person has no clue where the right direction is. Because they want to be helpful, they don't want to lose their face, so you always get a result. And I always say, AI is a Thai. So you always get a result. So, and this is something where we say these hallucinations, they are kind of, it's important to understand these systems. So like when you say, now I shortly changed to German to say, Amsel, Drossel, Fink und Star. Absolutely. This is how JetGPT works. So you give two pieces and the system says, what's the next most probable answer to that? And this is Star in Germany, because we know that. This is how AI works. It doesn't calculate it. Say, what's the most probable solution in that? So and therefore to say, when you're not sure, say it's not sure. And then this is why in the keynote when you follow, I said prompt engineering. When somebody says, okay, what are your children doing? What should they study? And people say prompt engineering. I say, no, it's not a good idea, because the systems can do their prompt engineering themselves. It's always a good idea to have a good understanding on what the systems are doing. So it's like a football coach, for example. Like Klopp, he was never the best player on the football field, but he was playing football himself, or soccer, depending on where you're coming from. So you should have an idea, it's a good idea. But now I said, I want you to be my prompt engineer. Your goal is to help me create the best possible prompt for my needs. The prompt will be used by Copilot. You will follow the following process. And here again, you are in the iterative process here. And you say, first ask me what the prompt should be about. I will give my answer, but we will improve it through constant repetition, going through it step by step. This is what you should always do. Never take the first result. And yes, sometimes it's annoying, especially when I'm talking to the systems. When I say, don't always ask back. And you sometimes have that with new employees, where I say, after the fifth question, you say, okay, could you please stop asking stupid questions and start working? There's a balance, of course, between it. But I say, okay, you can always say stop with the system. But I say, okay, based on my input, give me the following two sections. A revised prompt. Provide your rewritten prompt. It should be clear, concise, and easy for you to understand. So what you should always do with every system, that you have a custom instruction saying, okay, with everything I'm giving you, it's kind of like you would have a personal leadership coach. And when you are talking to an employee and giving him a new job, that somebody would translate it and say, okay, probably when you just say this direction 100, so your leadership coach would probably say, okay, this is the target, this is the idea, please let me know what you need. Have you any questions in that? So in the day-to-day business, sometimes we forget that, and it's a good idea. Here you have your AI coach, everything and every time on hand. Then I say, ask me relevant questions about additional pieces of information that are needed to improve the prompt. And then we continue it until I say, stop it. So and this is one thing which you can integrate in JetGPT. You have it here in the so-called custom instructions. The next thing is to say, when I now have something, you have a new chat, what you can always do is to say, merke dir, for those who are German, as the most of you are here in German, you should remember merke dir Doppelpunkt. Or you say store or memorize. Why that? What you can do is that when the system shall remember things, merke dir, so, and I do it in German now here, but I can do it also. Yeah, I do it in German now, because usually I'm communicating my custom instructions in German. You should usually stick to your language that it doesn't get confused. Merke dir, ich halte Vorträge ich helfe Führungskräften, Technologien zu verstehen. So, what I do now, it says, you see, memory updated. And you should do this. It's like when you talk to a new employee, you said, okay, these are the things, the facts you should know and you should always consider. When you say marketeer or store, remember, so you should always check whether it says memory updated. Because sometimes it doesn't get it. There's a question here.
Yes, thank you. Is it better to put it in a customer settings or to prompt it like here? So
this is, yeah, the custom instructions, these you can enter them in the personalization sections, custom instructions, benutzerdefinierte Einstellungen. The memory, you can delete memories, but you cannot enter them into the settings. That's a kind of, I think it's strange. So because you find all the pieces of information that Copilot has stored, but you cannot enter new ones. So therefore, to enter it, the only manual way is to go into a chat and to say marketeer or remember.
Is it possible to review all the things Copilot already remembered?
Absolutely, so you can review it. So now I said, okay, Marketeer, ich helfe Führungskräften, Technologien zu verstehen. So it remembered it. It asked to say, okay, shall I take it into consideration? And I said, yes, please take it into consideration. Sorry for the international guests. So I now, because this is my live system, I don't want to confuse it. So ideally, the best way to talk to the system is in English. So when you usually produce output in German, so then it's sometimes better to talk in German with the system. As I'm usually producing output in German, I decided, especially with the custom instructions, that I enter it in German so that you have less misunderstandings and translation issues in that. So now I said he should do that, and what you should always do it, here it says, shall I also help you your presentation to optimize it so that it is extremely understandable for managers. And say, great, I wouldn't have thought about that in terms of my briefing. So you should always read it, and the longer you work with the system, the better it understands you and the better the questions are. And I say, yes, please, ja bitte. And just yesterday we had the discussion where Andreas said, oh, could you please explain the people not to say please and thank you to the systems? And that was 100% right until 6-7 months ago when the GPT-5 models were coming. The current status in terms of the latest studies is to say it is a good idea to be polite to the system, to say please and thank you. But please, and there I'm 100% with Andreas, don't overdo it. So don't write, would you please be so kind to, if you at one time have a bit of computing capacity and a bit more energy, to probably answer me one of those questions. So I'm even getting confused as a human with that. So AI should ideally be briefed with short, concise sentences. It's like public speaking. So with public speaking, you should always have short, concise sentences. This is what you understand. So, and the AI gets confused when you have too much. And as Andreas absolutely correctly said, is you're burning a lot of energy with that because these are additional pieces of information which have to be processed. But you should definitely not be unpolite. So now he said, okay, I want to have it and to say, yes, please. So, ja bitte, and what I always say, he says, yes, and it gives me also some things here again. And what you should always do is when you have a good answer, you should always give thumbs up. And what you can also do, especially when you have a thumbs down, give a feedback. It's like when you have a new employee and the first job he gives back sucks. So then you don't fire him. You say, okay, this was great what you already did, and here you probably have to rethink it, or here, usually I have a human assistant also, so, and when he fails, so the first thing is where I'm asking myself, watching in the mirror, was my briefing okay? And in 9 from 10 cases, my briefing was shitty. So, or I didn't provide him with the information he needed to do the job. So I wasn't clear enough. That's usually, at least looking into my mirror. Everybody has to take his or her own decision, but this is mine. And the good thing is when people say, I'm not getting the results, it's hallucinating, so it's not writing in my style. And I always say, have you given thumbs up? Have you given thumbs down? Have you given a feedback on that? So, and the extreme form of feedback, when you get a false result, please write false, and write what was false, and say correct is this. And the system is learning. The nice thing is, it never gets grumpy. So with team members, it's sometimes a bit more difficult. And usually, it doesn't forget it. I always say usually, because sometimes, especially when you have longer conversations, the bottleneck is the so-called token window. And with a token window, a token is approximately a syllable. And then you say, okay, the maximum currently systems have is about, in the usual normal market is about 1 million tokens. That's a lot of stuff. But usually you have token windows from about 100 to 200,000 tokens, for example. Yeah.
For me, it seems like what you're doing here is shaping artificial personality.
Absolutely.
And when you do it over a time span,
yep.
How do you know what personality AI got? So
yeah, very good question.
It gets more complicated, more complex.
Absolutely.
And, so you have to know which personality is it.
Absolutely, a great question. So just for those who probably weren't able to listen it and for the recording to say the question is, when you have trained your artificial personality, and I like that idea and that parallel to say, well, you're training your artificial personality, your assistant, your virtual assistant, how do I know what the system knows, what the assistant knows? And the good thing is here, what you can do is here, and I would love to have that in some change management projects with human beings. Because what you can do here, you can go to the settings here, and in the settings you have personalization, and here you have the co-pilot memory. So in here you have Thorsten, Jekel hilft Führungskräften, Technologien zu verstehen. That was what I just said. Please remember that. And we as humans, for us, it's much harder to de-learn things. Here you can de-learn with just a delete button. So in change management, we always say, okay, it's so hard that people adopt to new things. The harder thing is to de-learn the stuff that they did 20 years, which led to their success. So this is the harder part of it, because we're surviving by habits, like breathing. Very old habit, but it helps us to survive. So that's how we are working with that. So the nice thing, and I hope that answers your question, is you can go into this. And in addition to what I said before, what you cannot do is, and I find that kind of confusing, I would expect that I would be able to enter a new memory in here. You cannot do that. So therefore, I did it in a regular chat. And I said, merke dir, or remember, and then you say, okay, this is what you should remember. And always merke dir, Doppelpunkt. What is Doppelpunkt in English? Column? Thank you. With the column, so remember a column, and then it knows. So don't write, please be so kind to remember that every time you short and concise. This is very important, and use it. And you can also ask to say in a new chat, for example, we are here in the chat where we're optimizing, to say, how can I optimize my custom instructions. So you can also ask, here are some ways to do it. So you can say, okay, what is clear formatting roles, define structure, clarify uncertainty handling, add contextual focus. So he even gives me, and he said, okay, would you like me to draft an optimized version of your entire custom instruction set? And I said, great idea. So I give a thumbs up, and I said, yes, please. And even when I have a typo, so here, now I get, and you see, here, I get, even when I'm multilingual now, it says, okay, formal was what I wrote there. Instead, when I have something in German, say the Z form, so he's so smart, to sense that in that way, to say, and he took some things out of my original briefing, and he added some things which I didn't have in that. So if unsure, explicitly state that, contextual focus, and here say, responses should reflect that you help leaders understand technology. And here you see how the custom instructions and the memory are interacting. So what you can do is to say, okay, now I gave him a new memory piece to say, remember that I'm helping leaders to understand technology, to use it. So he integrated it into the custom instructions because this is my role. So, and this, of course, don't copy it one-to-one because that's not your role, that's my role. And that can be different. And this is personal. This is per Copilot user. So what you can do, of course, you can build agents where you have different sets of things which can also be used not only by individuals but also by teams. But here you have something which you can and which you should use for yourself, and where you see that. And where you can always also say, another idea is you can upload stuff. So what I can do, for example, I can upload a file. And, okay, now I see technology doesn't want to upload here. But as before, I said I don't let us stop with not working technology. So when I upload a book, for example, or an article, then what I can say, please adjust my custom instructions based on this article or based on this book. So when you're writing an article or report and it is not like your style is, give the system your style. Give him 1 or 2 samples, either from you or from other people that have done smart stuff, and where you say, okay, this is kind of the stuff I would like to use. And then you can say, can you give me custom instructions with that? And it's always a good idea to always ask the system, how can I do it better? It's always a good idea to use them. I know that was a very long answer to the question, how can we do a good prompt? But I hope it was helpful, not only for you, but for the other ones, and try to integrate the other questions too. Before I continue, are there any more questions now which you have, which I can answer? Then, of course, I will definitely address them. Yeah, you were the first to raise your hand. There's a microphone coming from Andreas. Thank you very much, Andreas.
My question is, because of the personalization features you just introduced, is it also possible to give Copilot my style, so my writing style, by giving him a large sample of, for example, my emails?
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's the nice thing is within the Copilot, you can also, this is then restricted to the paid version of it. So what you can do is, and you see that here, who has the paid version of Microsoft Copilot, the $30 extra license? Cool, there's more hands than I was expecting. The researcher, for example, is a very powerful tool which you could probably use when you're looking into industry benchmarks, when you're looking into sector information. And in my keynote I said, going into the internet, doing some research, I would usually recommend Perplexity. This is true for the basic version. So, but with the researcher within ChatGPT, therefore you're here in the masterclass, so this is the add-on to the keynote. So here, what you can do is you can say, in the researcher, which sources do you want to integrate? And here you can even also integrate, like you just asked, your emails. So you can say, please use that too. And this is a very powerful tool where you can say, do some research on that. Please integrate the sources. And here you can choose whether you want to integrate your web sources. Especially good when you're working into industry analyses and comparisons, for example. Then you would integrate the web. If you would want to do some deeper analysis on one entity where you have a lot of information on your systems, you would probably be better deactivating that. In 90% of the situations where I'm using AI, I am deactivating the internet. Because not only since Donald Trump entered the arena, there was a lot of fake news and misinformation in the internet. And it's not getting better, so Steve Bannon, one of the advisors of Donald Trump, is very open on that. He said, our strategy is flooding the zone with shit. And Steve Bannon is not the only who's flooding the zone with shit. So therefore, there is, and it's not getting better with artificial intelligence generated content on the internet. Who is also annoyed by these AI-generated LinkedIn posts to say, yeah, I think, okay, that's a waste of time, I think, when you see, I especially like those AI-generated comments where you say, there's no really use for that, it's just getting reach, and that's not sensible. Don't do that. So here, to answer your question, and probably also as an impulse for that, you can use the researcher, and you can also build bots then with the Copilot Studio. Here you have pre-trained bots, and you can also build own bots, and with that you can say, which sources of knowledge do you integrate in that? And then you can say, do you want to integrate your emails? Do you want to integrate SharePoint sources? You can also integrate, who has Power BI, for example? So you can integrate Power BI in that. You can integrate Dataverse or more. Another question.
If I understand it rightly, you recommend to use Copilot for various reasons. And I understood that the system gets better by usage. The more you use it, the more it learns it. How does it get along with using other large language model like Perplexity or something like this? Does it exclude, or how do you cope with this? Because normally you should stick to Copilot in this case to make it better and better and better. Yeah. And this normally would exclude then the usage of the other model. Yeah, it's a very good question, and there's no 100% perfect answer, of course, to this. What I usually do is I say, okay, first one is always use the systems you already have, you already pay for, and especially where the majority of your data is sitting in. Because when you're working on that, and this is the big advantage of Copilot, it can work with your data. So, and in most of the cases, you even deactivate information from the internet. And the research agent has brought a lot of functionality which was only available in Perplexity, because of course they are all competitors. They are kind of reacting to stuff to say, okay, Perplexity is stealing some market share, probably have to work on that too. So my very practical advice, I would start to work with the researcher first, and then to see, is the answer satisfying, / what another great idea is to say, to verify it with Perplexity. Because this is kind of like when you have a serial medical issue, for example. So you would probably not only go to one doctor, you would probably try to get a second piece of advice. And this is also a very good idea with AI, to probably verify it. Like you would probably, when you have a difficult question, you would probably also ask 2 colleagues, or one male colleague, female colleague with different experiences in that. So therefore what I would usually recommend is to stick mainly with the systems you have, plus in addition, so when you have additional reporting systems, when you have databases where you're getting your betas, for example, and these things. So more and more of these solutions are integrating artificial intelligence. So before you're working with systems where all these databases are not behind it, like EBIS, for example, which we have here as, is EBIS here in the room by incident? So before I tell something about EBIS, so the guys know their system better, but like the EBIS system, for example, they have the databases where you can get company information, sector information, and now they have already integrated an AI chatbot where you can answer questions to that company. So you can see that on their booth. I have seen that in one of the last breaks. And within the next 6 months, they will also integrate, and I'm not sponsored by them, so don't get me wrong. They are implementing a chatbot which is will also be able to answer questions over companies, so over the whole set of that. So therefore the question is also always to say, which system do you use? Main question is to say, which data do you need, and verify. I hope that helps for you and the others also. Yeah, we have 5 minutes or 4 minutes left, so time for another question from the floor here, if somebody have it. So if that is not the case, I give you one last, with Apple Keynote, there was always one more thing. So one more thing is also when you are here with me in the room. Who knows Notebook LM from Google? Cool. So Notebook LM is a great tool when you are at conferences, for example.
So Notebook LM is a tool from Microsoft. So, and when I said IDWS1 to say, okay, I have no clue what it is. So what did I do? And that's the idea of Notebook LM. The idea of Notebook LM is to say, you enter sources to it. And what did I do? Is I watched for some internet sources. So what you can do is you can add websites, you can add YouTube videos, you can add texts, and what you can also do is you can add here with the research, and it showed me some links to that, and then you can ask questions, and what you can also do, you can get reports and audio and video podcasts of that. You have already used it? Yes. Would you like to share our, do you have a microphone again? That's great. Thank you very much, Andreas. So, would you like to share your experience? Because we already have we have two microphones. That's great.
It's working. I'm also working.
Then take this one. That should you usually.
Yes, honestly, I use it quite frequently, especially when I have some, let's say, longer reports, which I do not have the time to read it. Normally you summarize it, but here I use the podcast functionality, especially in the train.
Yeah.
You have this podcast of two guys talking with each other and discussing, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it too. Don't know whether we have the audio from the computer, from the audio colleague. So just, it doesn't seem to be connected at the moment. I didn't test it. So you see, but we can do it here with my own. So what we have here.
Encrypted query. 3 letters and a digit, IDWS1.
Just that. But that tiny query, it turns out, sits right at the intersection of 3 completely different, yet, well, commercially tangled, high-stakes worlds.
Absolutely. You search for that, and you could find yourself deep in German corporate law.
So I really love that. So you put a lot of stuff in there. You can hear it in the car, for example. And the good news now to tie that all together, you would probably do that with IDWS1 because that's publicly available information when you say, okay, I want to understand it. I did it, for example, with the EU AI Act. So reading that, so it's not a funny thing. So what I did is I pulled everything about that. I pulled 2.5 hours webinar sessions, which were very good, but nobody listens to 2.5 hours webinar recording. So what you just do, you throw it in. You can also build Q&As for that, for example. So several things. That's great. And the good thing is Microsoft has integrated that now into the Copilot. So, and what it is called Notebooks. So this is the Notebook LM copy. Now what you can do is, here I was at a conference, and at the conference what I can do is I can upload my references, everything, and then I can't get a video yet. That's what Notebook LM is also providing. You can now get a video with video explanations. Now, but what you already get is you get an audio interview form, which is kind of the same level of quality like Notebook LM. And so you can also use it for confidential pieces of information. With that, it is 11:29. I now close the session officially, but I will be here until the end of the conference and a bit longer. So if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to contact me. And if you haven't done yet, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Here's the QR code. And every Tuesday from 12:30 to 12:45, I am live on LinkedIn with TJ Technology Tuesday, where I'm also giving just a short, snackable 15 minutes impulse on technology for leaders. And with that, I say thank you very much for your smart question. It always makes it very much fun to have a smart audience like you. Thank you very much. All the best. Absolutely.
You talked about a well-fitted toolkit, so to say, with not too many, but not too few tools. If you would only use like maybe 4 or 5 tools, which ones would you recommend?
Yeah, one thing I would recommend, and I can't give you a recommendation, I would look into a specialized tool in your sector. I assume there are a lot of tools, like some of the exhibitors here, and you can judge it much better which of those are very good. So I say because they are specialized on that. So one should always be in your sector. They like the exhibitors here. The other one, yeah. And then it is good to have the Copilot. So in there, and then especially when you have high confidential pieces of information, it's probably also a good idea to think about a local AI. So because when you have nowadays, you can, and there's a system like, I don't know whether you heard about this system, for example, here. This is called Hyperlink. And it used to be having an own AI on-premise on your PC offline is something which used to be very complicated, and now you can install it on every regular PC or Mac, and then what you can do is you can connect the standard model from OpenAI, from Google Gemini, from all the good models, and you can work completely locally in your system. So
it's
especially
Hyperlink?
Hyperlink is it called, the on-device AI super assistant, and this is something where I would say the Microsoft Copilot, I would say one system out of the, for example, the providers which are here, which are linked to databases, which are like the ones which I also mentioned in my keynote, and you should probably think about something like Hyperlink, where you can download models and there you can connect it to your local data. Because I assume you have some highly sensitive pieces of information sometimes, and you don't want to have that. So with that, and there you can train it, and this is then not connected to the internet.
Okay, perfect. Perfect.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. And also that Keynote LM. That sounds very useful. So that is that part of Copilot?
What you have is in Notebook LM, the nice thing is they integrated, it's now here, it's called Notebooks. Yeah. So, and a lot of people who use Notebook LM, they say, that's a great system, I want to use that to get those audio reports, but the problem is you are uploading it to Google. So therefore, when I now looking into IDW as one, no problem, it's publicly available information. But when you probably say you have a meeting with a customer, so you have confidential information, say, okay, what should I probably, when you drive to the client, it's a good idea, very often do that, driving to a client, I listen to a 10-minute podcast to say, what's the heads up, what are the latest news, and these are the things where you can use now the notebook function, which is actually, this is unfortunately only available in the paid version of Copilot, so you won't find it in the regular one, but this is something as one of the recommendations, Copilot, and they're adding more and more stuff, like for example, meeting transcripts in Teams, which are very good, I think, so we can have that together. Hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Super, thank you. And probably when you have, sorry again, I always give more answers to then what I showed before, thinking about something when you, like NIMUS for example, where you have the possibilities when you even have hundreds of documents. Sometimes I'm working with an M&A company, for example, they have in those transactions, they have tons of contracts they have to go through and identifying risks. So what they do is they have the batch processing here where all the contracts are blacked, all the information with all the companies and everything like that, and then they give it to AI, and then you can compare it, you can identify risks, but you don't disclose any private information.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank
Super.
You. Yeah.
Thank you very much for asking. How can I help you? Oder wie kann ich Ihnen helfen?
Genau, also erstmal brillante Vorträge, super.
Danke sehr.
Total inspirierend, also das habe ich genau gebraucht, um mich da jetzt mehr mit zu beschäftigen. Frage ist ganz einfach. Ich habe überhaupt noch nicht entdeckt, wie ich aus Recherchen oder aus selbst recherchierten eine automatische Präsentation generieren lassen kann.
Ja.
Mit welchem Tool macht man? Also ChatGPT geht gar nicht.
Ja, also ich muss ganz ehrlich sagen, die Qualität der Präsentation, die man rauskriegt, ist noch sehr rudimentär.
Okay, also das ist nicht nur,
das ist nicht nur der Engpass bei Ihnen.
Okay.
Ich würde es aktuell wirklich mal probieren mit dem Copilot, wenn Sie den haben. Und da können Sie sagen, erstellen mir eine PowerPoint-Präsentation. Da bin ich immer wieder erstaunt.
Als Prompt.
Genau, dann erstelle mir aus diesem Ergebnis eine PowerPoint-Präsentation. Ich bin immer wieder erstaunt, dass es mittlerweile relativ gut funktioniert.
Gut.
Also Sie können auch in PowerPoint, gibt es ja auch, wenn Sie bezahlte Version haben, die Möglichkeit, aber ich finde fast die Möglichkeit hier besser. Und es wird immer besser.
Okay.
Sonst gibt es noch die aktuell beste Engine in dem Bereich, heißt Gamma. Also wenn Sie jetzt eine Präsentation haben, die heißt nicht Gamma AI, sondern Gamma App.
Ja.
So, da ist es nur so, das ist halt nicht Microsoft 365. So, das heißt, wenn ich jetzt hier eine Präsentation mache, zum Beispiel, hier habe ich für einen Kunden gemacht, eine Executive Summary für Microsoft Purview zum Beispiel. So, und das ist jetzt etwas, wo es darum ging, dass ich einem Kunden erklärt habe, was ist praktisch Purview. So, und diese Präsentation ist super und das sind ja keinerlei vertrauliche Informationen, sondern geht es ja darum zu sagen, ich erkläre Ihnen ein Konzept einfach. Das kann man wunderbar mit Gamma machen. Und da können Sie sehr, sehr, wie ich finde, hier hat man sehr schöne, ich sag mal, qualitative Charts, die man so 1:1 nutzen kann. Die ist wirklich toll.
Also das würde für mich schon, weil ich brauche das dann einfach nur, um mit dem Team was zu besprechen oder mit dem Mandanten. Genau wie sagen wir, die wollen ja heute nur noch Bullet Points haben.
Ja, genau.
Keine wie heißt das früher, Tischvorlagen.
Ja, genau, Tischvorlagen. Kenne ich auch noch. Ich bin 57, also ich kenne das auch. Ja.
Super.
Also von der Seite. Hoffe ich, dass Ihnen das ein bisschen hilft.
Absolut, ich verlinke mich. Das war wirklich großartig.
Sehr, sehr gerne.
Weil ich jetzt Anschub bekommen habe.
So, das war die Idee. Freut mich sehr. Vielen herzlichen Dank. Bleiben Sie dran.
Das heißt, ich habe jetzt dann in Copilot einfach seine Berichte hochgeladen und gesagt, schreib so wie mein Chef, also wie Brian.
Ja, schreib auch die Idee zu sagen, ja?
Und dann habe ich tatsächlich, ich habe ihm dann, also ich habe einen Report gemacht und auf unterschiedlichen Slides, einmal in meinem Ton, einmal in super hoch und dann einmal in seinem Ton und habe ihm das zur Review gegeben und wollte mal gucken, ob er es mitkriegt.
Ja.
Er hat nicht alles gecheckt. So, er kam dann so, oh, Annika, also den Teil hast du ja super geschrieben. Ich so,
das war der, der in seinem Stil war, oder?
Ja, klar.
Der Männergerechte.
Natürlich.
Es gibt ja auch, wenn man, ich weiß nicht, ob Sie sich mit dem Thema Persönlichkeitsmodelle mal beschäftigt haben, also DISC oder MBTI, also gibt es da verschiedene Modelle. Da gibt es ja sagen, es gibt Menschen, die sind tendenziell extrovertiert, eher introvertiert, welche, die mehr menschenorientiert, immer sachorientiert sind und aus diesen 2 Dimensionen gibt es so 4 Quadranten. Und dann kann man zum Beispiel sagen, schreibt man es jetzt für den dominanten Typ, für den Initiativen, für den stetigen, für den gewissenhaften beispielsweise. Also für den, der Zahlen, Daten, Fakten haben will, für den, der sagt, ich brauche das neueste shiny Tool beispielsweise. Und das hilft total. Also das kennen die Systeme auch. Da kann ich sagen, so schreibe, also wenn ich Angebote schreibe beispielsweise, was ich mache, ist zu sagen, hier ist das LinkedIn-Profil von diesem Kunden, für den ich ein Angebot schreibe. Mach mir eine Analyse seines Persönlichkeitsstils auf der Basis seines LinkedIn-Profils. Und dann sage ich, überarbeite mir mein Angebot auf der Basis dessen, wie seine Persönlichkeitsstruktur ist, die du auf LinkedIn hast. Das gibt mega Ergebnisse. Da kommen Angebote raus, wo ich sage, hätte ich jetzt nie so geschrieben, weil ich vielleicht halt ein anderer Persönlichkeitstyp bin. Aber so wie Sie sagen, das, was der Chef, ich sag mal...
Das hat mich halt immer genervt, weil es ging ja nicht um inhaltliche Sachen, es war wirklich so Wording, so, also nicht seine Lieblingsworte benutzen.
Im Bullshit-Bingo halt die Lieblingsdinge, ja, logischerweise.
Genau, so. Und irgendwann war ich halt so genervt, weil das dauert ja auch ewig, dann reviewt er und sagt, nein, den Satz schreibt man anders,
Ja, genau.
Ja, ich keinen Bock mehr drauf. So.
Ja.
Dafür war es super.
Ja, und dafür ist es mega, ja.
Das kann man unterhalten, ja. Ich hab die Mitarbeit mit 2 sehr qualifizierten Mitarbeitern geändert. Die waren beide promoviert. Weil die Stile, wenn wir Gutachten schreiben, das hat nicht zusammengepasst, das hat nicht gematcht. Da habe ich gesagt, das...
Genau,
heute wäre das
Heute
wäre das kein Thema mehr.
Ja, nachvollziehbar. Da kann man, zieh ab, gar kein Thema. Zieh alles ab. Den anderen Rechner habe ich unten drunter.
Genau, das ist von dir, ne?
Genau, nicht das HDMI-Kabel, das ist von euch, aber mein Klicker ist von mir, den sollte ich auf keinen Fall liegen lassen.
Das Mikrofon müssten wir dann auch schon mal einsammeln, dass wir den nächsten Herren verkabeln.
Genau, den Bodypack, den habe ich noch aus dem Raum unten. Soll ich den unten wieder abgeben, oder?
Nee, das haben wir jetzt getauscht.
Also alles hier oben abgeben?
Genau.
Dann mache ich das sofort. Genau, gar kein Thema.
Ein kleines Dankeschön von uns.
Das ist ganz lieb.
Für Sie und für die werte Gattin.
Ja, das ist aber nett. Vielen herzlichen Dank. Das weiß ich sehr zu schätzen. Wunderbar. Dankeschön. Vielen Dank. Gerne. Du willst mein Mikro haben und mein Best. Ich bin so der nächste Referenzfahrt.
in der Warteschleife. Ich habe eine Frage, wie man so bedienlich in der Datenqualität so eine Art Red Flag schaffen kann. Ich habe zum Beispiel ein Beispiel, ich habe gesucht Renditen für Projekte in der Immobilienentwicklung. Er hat mir 3 Quellen und dann habe ich gefragt, gib mir die Quellen.
Ja.
Der Wert, den er mir ausgenannt hat, war plausibel, 20 bis 25%.
Ja.
Okay.
Ja.
Und habe dann gesagt, gib mir die Quellen.
Ja.
Habe mir 3 referenziert, aber nirgendwo habe ich die Renditen gefunden, die ich gesucht habe und nicht mal die Zahlen. Und ich habe nicht verstanden, wo kam das jetzt her?
Mit welchem Tool haben Sie es gemacht?
Das war Perplexity.
Ja, auch Perplexity passt manchmal. Haben Sie in Perplexity bei den Quellen angehakt und abgehakt? Also bei den Quellen kann man sagen, ich will nur beispielsweise akademische Quellen. Ich will keine
Die Quellen waren top. Das waren Studien genau aus dem Immobilienumfeld, die ich
also die
auch
waren gut, aber die Zahlen waren
top.
nicht drin entsprechend. Ja. Also was manchmal hilft, ist in Perplexity kann man ja die Quellen wählen und mal versuchen mit Web abzuklemmen. und nur auf akademische Quellen zu gehen. Und dann hat er eine deutlich höhere Genauigkeit. Also das heißt, man kann bei Perplexity gibt es so einen kleinen Globus und dann kann ich die Quellen wählen. Dann kann man sagen, ich will beispielsweise Social weghaben, ich will das Thema Web weghaben, ich will nur die eigenen Quellen. Was dann nochmal hilft, ist Aphorei als Tool. Das kommt aus dem wissenschaftlichen Bereich. Das ist gebaut für Leute, die promovieren. Und wenn du promovierst, darfst du ja auch nicht fantasieren. Also da muss ja alles stimmen. So, das heißt, und da ist das Tool, man kann praktisch so, statt Endnote, kann ich praktisch meine ganzen References eben managen damit. Und das Tool ist sehr, sehr stark, weil oft sind es ja Dinge, die sie später auch wieder nochmal brauchen. Und dann kann man sich eben wunderbar so eine eigene Knowledge-Database damit aufbauen und dann kann die befragen. Und dann kriegt man nicht nur die Quelle, sondern man kriegt genau die Fundstelle, wo das Ding auch drin ist. Also, und das ist ja das, was sie dann auch brauchen. Ne?
Hatten wir die Seite genannt, aber es war einfach die Zahl dort nicht.
Ja, ja. Und leider ist das auch, und es wird auch selbst bei Perplexity und selbst bei den Systemen, es ist leider immer noch Probability. Und das ist einfach immer noch so, dass es eine Mischung aus auch den vortrainierten Modellen ist, in dem was da ist.
Kann es sein, wenn ich da gesagt hätte, sag mir, du bist sicher oder sag mir, du bist nicht sicher, dass ich dadurch erkannt hätte, dass es die Zahl gar nicht gibt?
Es ist nicht 100% sicher, aber es ist zumindest eine Möglichkeit, das nochmal zu reduzieren, das Thema Halluzinieren.
Das ist ja das extrem wichtig, wenn ich es nutze, dass ich ihm gleich sagen kann, wenn das eine Red Flag ist und du erzählst mir irgendeinen Quatsch, dann will ich das gleich sehen, weil sonst muss ich es doch manuell nachschauen, ich muss in die Quellen reinschauen.
Das wird immer besser.
Ich brauche eine Review-Möglichkeit.
Also wir sind bei JetGPT 7 aktuell bei 67% Reliability, das heißt aber eben 23% ist immer noch so, dass 23% eben halt Hallucinations sind. Bei 4 war es aber unter 50%, also das heißt, wir werden da besser und die Modelle, alle haben gesagt, JetGPT 4 zu JetGPT 5 ist doch kein großer Unterschied. Das waren deutlich weniger Halluzinationen, die man drin hatte.
Ganz kurz, ich habe den Anfang nicht mitgekriegt, aber das war auch meine Frage mit Copilot und
vielen Dank.
Kann man nicht einfach Benutzer nur Primärquellen eingeben und das funktioniert aber nicht. Also wenn ich jetzt eine Recherche mache und ich möchte gerne, dass er nur Primärquellen benutzt, also wissenschaftliche Quellen, kann ich das nicht einfach irgendwie anweisen und dann macht er das.
Das kann man bei einigen Systemen machen, dass man es anhakt, dass er dann eben nur die Quellen entsprechend nutzen soll.
Bei also Copilot auch?
Geht bei Copilot und Research Agents kann ich es auch mit reinnehmen. Ja. Und ich kann, wenn ich eben, es gibt ein Copilot Studio, da kann ich noch tiefer reingehen und dann kann ich ihm nochmal sehr genau sagen, auch in welche Reihenfolge er was packen soll. Das heißt, ich kann zum Beispiel sagen, geh zuerst in die internen Sources, wenn du in den internen Sources nichts findest, geh auf akademische Quellen, wenn du da nichts findest, geh nochmal weiter. Das ist ja auch typischerweise so in der Reihenfolge. Das kann man nie. Ja.
Das würde das auch unterstützen, ne?
Diese Notebook-Funktionalität meinen Sie oder welches? Oder Aphorei, genau, Aphorei. Ja, genau.
So, mein Lieber. Also ich war ja Freund.
Ich glaube ja, oder? Ja, wunderbar.
Nichts mehr hier? Das auch nicht?
Genau, habe ich alles. Genau, hinten habe ich noch Technik. Nee, das war vom Bodentank, bevor der nächste da drüber stolpert, ja.
Ich meine, ich war ja befangen vorher. Wie gesagt habe, beste Keynote. Aber wenn hier meine Damen sagen, meine Nicole und da unten, kamen noch nie so viele Leute raus.
Ja.
Das ist der Mikro. Beste Keynote, dann war das nicht mal meine subjektive Meinung, was wir uns kennen. Das war auch so, nein, war wirklich mit Abstand. Also wir haben im fachlichen Bereich gibt es